There's a whole category of weed now that people call exotic. It's the top shelf stuff. The loud, colorful, candy-flavored bud that is coated in so much frost that it looks fake. And it's priced way above everything else in the case. And if you had to pick one strain that became the face of that entire movement, the one that made weed feel like a luxury streetwear drop, it's this one. It's called Runtz. And it went from a small batch of jars at a competition to one of the most famous, most copied names in the history of cannabis. This is the story of Runtz. So let's start with where it came from. And this is a fun one, because we actually know the origin scene pretty well. Runtz was created in California around 2017 by a small crew of guys out of the Los Angeles area, connected to the world of cookies, which was the famous brand ran by the rapper Berner. And the key names behind it were Ray Bama, who handled the branding and marketing, and Young LB, who was the rapper who helped push it into the culture, alongside a grower who made the actual plant. And they made it by crossing two of the most beloved candy-flavored strains around at the time. And the way it broke out to the world is a great story. It goes like this. They showed up at the Emerald Cup in Santa Rosa at the end of 2017 with a small batch of jars, some t-shirts, and models to hand them out. And they set up right in front of the cookies booth. And they sold out almost instantly. The demand was so crazy that they reportedly got asked to leave, but Berner noticed, and cookies ended up becoming the brand that distributed Runtz to the world. But to really understand why Runtz caused that kind of frenzy, you have to look at what it's actually made of, because its parents are both legends in their own right. The first is Zkittlez, a strain originally bred by Terp hogs and third-gen family farms, famous for tasting exactly like a handful of fruity candy, all sweet and tropical. The second is Gelato, a strain from the cookies family known for a creamy, dessert-like flavor, gorgeous purple coloring, and a heavy coat of frost. So think about that combo. You're taking the loudest candy flavor on one side and crossing it with one of the prettiest, creamiest, frostiest strains on the other. Skittles brought the sweet fruit candy punch, and Gelato brought the creamy dessert richness, the deep purple color, and that heavy blanket of frost. And what came out of putting those two together was something genuinely special. Now, I do want to be honest about the genetics here, because that's the honest thing this channel does. That Skittles crossed with Gelato story is the widely accepted one, and it's almost certainly right, but it's never been locked down in a lab. And who exactly deserves the credit, as the breeder is actually a little contested. Different people in that crew get named as the real creator, depending on who's telling the story. So the outline is solid, one guy grew it, another branded it, but the fine details are a bit murky, like they are with a lot of famous strains. But that still leaves us with the question, where does its name come from? And the answer is, it's named after the candy, Runtz, those little fruit-shaped candies. And it fit for a few reasons. The flavor was sweet and fruity, like candy. The little nugs were small, like Runtz. And the Zkittlez parent already had that candy theme going. So Runtz just clicked as a name. Now let's get into what actually made Runtz blow up, because it wasn't just one thing. It was the perfect storm of three things at once: flavor, looks, and strength. First, the flavor. Runtz nailed that sweet, fruity candy taste that everybody was chasing. It's creamy and sugary and smooth, genuinely reminiscent of the candy it's named after. A big part of that flavor comes down to its terpene profile, with caryophyllene being the dominant terpene, giving it that slight spicy, peppery depth underneath all the sweetness. And limonene adds that bright citrusy, fruity top note that makes it smell like you cracked open a bag of candy. When you opened a bag, people would just say candy. That was the reaction, over and over. There was nothing else quite hitting that exact sweet, creamy note at the time, and that alone would have made it stand out. Second, and maybe most important, the looks. Because this is where Runtz became a legend. Runtz is a stunning-looking plant. We're talking deep purples, sometimes so dark they look almost black, with pinks and greens mixed in, and the whole thing absolutely buried under a thick layer of frosty crystals. In the weed world, they call this bag appeal, meaning how good it looks when you first see it. And Runtz had more bag appeal than just about anything before it. One judge at a competition literally described a batch of it as the most beautiful bud in the entire contest, comparing it to a jet that takes you to space. It just looked expensive. And in a world where people increasingly shopped for weed with their eyes first, that look was everything. And third, the strength. Runtz is a true 50-50 balanced hybrid, meaning it gives you the best of both worlds. A happy, uplifting, euphoric head high that melts into a relaxed body feeling without knocking you out. And it's potent, usually testing somewhere in the low to high 20s in THC. So it didn't just look and taste amazing. It actually delivered a strong, enjoyable high to back it all up. So you put those three things together: incredible flavor, unreal looks, and serious potency, and you get a strain that people went absolutely crazy for. And that leads us to the bigger thing Runtz actually did, which is way bigger than just being one popular strain. Runtz basically became the face of an entire new era of weed, the era of exotics. Now let me explain what exotic actually means in weed. For a long time, weed was mostly judged on one thing: how high it got you. But somewhere in the 2010s, the whole culture shifted. Suddenly, it became about rare genetics, wild candy and dessert flavors, insane colors, and that heavy frost. It became about weed as a luxury item, something rare and beautiful you'd pay a premium for and show off. People started calling this top-tier designer weed exotic, or sometimes ZA or Zaza. And Runtz became the absolute poster child for that whole movement. If you wanted to point at one strain and say, "This is what exotic weed means," you pointed at Runtz. And a huge part of that was the culture around it, especially hip-hop. Runtz got mentioned in rap song after rap song. In fact, reporting has found that the word Runtz shows up in over 100 different rap songs. That's insane exposure. One of the guys behind it put it perfectly. He compared dropping a new batch of Runtz to a fashion brand like Supreme dropping a new limited drop. It wasn't just weed anymore. It was a hyped-up luxury product with a brand behind it, and they marketed it exactly like streetwear, leaning into that hype culture with pop-up events, flashy packaging, and constant new drops. But now we get to the twist in the story, and it's a big one. The very thing that made Runtz so famous, that name, became something they couldn't fully control. Because Runtz became, by far, the most counterfeited and bootlegged name in the entire weed world. Think about it. The real crew was deliberately keeping supply small and exclusive to keep it special. But the demand was through the roof. So what happened? Bootleggers all over the world rushed in to fill that gap. They printed up cheap knockoff bootleg Mylar bags and stuffed them with whatever random weed they had. One of the founders said it best, joking that if you buy 10 bags of weed off the street, 9 of them will say Runtz on the bag. The name basically got hijacked and turned into a generic label for any candy weed, real or fake. For most people, Runtz stopped meaning a specific strain from a specific crew and just started meaning fancy candy weed in a shiny bag. And that leads into another headache that came with the name: legal trouble. See, naming your weed after a famous candy is a good way to get sued by the company that makes that candy. And that's exactly what happened. The huge candy company that owns the Runtz brand took legal action over the Runtz name and packaging. And Runtz wasn't alone in this. The same thing happened to its parent strain, Zkittlez, which got hit with legal action from the company that makes Skittles. In fact, Zkittlez eventually had to change its name, and now often goes by just the original Z. A big reason these candy companies pushed so hard is the genuine concern that weed products dressed up like candy could end up appealing to kids. So, between the bootleggers and the candy company lawsuits, the crew behind Runtz had a real problem. They had one of the most famous names in weed, but keeping control of it was a constant battle. So they leaned into building it as a legitimate, official brand, with real products and real ownership, trying to separate the genuine article from the sea of fakes. And that leaves us with the big question: where does Runtz stand today? And the obvious answer is right at the top. It's still considered one of the most important and popular strains of the modern era. It won Leafly's Strain of the Year for 2020, and it spawned a gigantic family of spin-offs. You've got White Runtz, which is even frostier. You've got Pink Runtz, which is sweeter and more colorful. And there are countless others, plus a whole wave of crosses that carry that Runtz name and flavor forward. It became one of the most bred with strains out there. So at the end of the day, Runtz is a story about how weed changed. It wasn't the first great strain, and it wasn't even the first candy-flavored one. But it showed up at the exact right moment, with the perfect combination of loud flavor, jaw-dropping looks, and real strength, and it rode the hip-hop and streetwear world to the very top. It turned a plant into a luxury brand, and it became the definition of that whole exotic era, the standard that fancy, colorful, candy weed is still measured against today. It also proved a tricky lesson. When your name gets that big, the whole world will try to take it from you.